Hey guys, welcome to the Neglected Podcast. This podcast is not to change your mind, but to invite you into somebody else's narrative. This is a podcast to give a voice to the neglected. It is also an opportunity for all of us to engage.
Hi, Neglected Podcast listeners. I am your host, Jovanna Javis, and I am here with a lovely guest, Melissa Sharp. Say hi to everybody.
Hi, everybody.
And so I'm so excited to have you here, Melissa. And I think even when we talked over the phone, I mentioned that we've kind of always been two ships passing each other. Like, I know you, but I don't know you.
Mm-hmm.
And we have very similar friends. I've known you when I attended Compassion, but I saw you on a Zoom call over quarantine, and I was suffering from being an extrovert. And so I've always enjoyed your presence and your energy and just everything that I've seen you post. And you did some talks on Facebook that I really loved, and we'll get to that. But I'm so excited that you said yes to being a guest here. And to start, I just want to ask you, tell me about you. Where are you from? Tell me a little bit about your family.
Okay. So glad to be here. A little bit about my family. My parents are from North Carolina, and my dad was in the military. He joined pretty much right out of high school. And so that meant that we were a traveling family. I was born in Colorado. I have an older sister. She was actually born in North Carolina, where my parents are from. And then I have two younger brothers. And so my dad was stationed in a lot of different places. So I got to, in addition to being born in Colorado, I didn't really get to see it because I was a baby when we left. He did a couple of tours in Germany and Texas. And then the longest tour was Georgia. Like, I was still a kid when we moved to Georgia, and he was stationed at Fort Stewart. And he actually retired from the Army when we were stationed at Fort Stewart. So that was his last duty station. And then my parents decided to make a home in good old Hinesville.
Yay.
Yeah, even though they are from North Carolina and still have family in North Carolina, that was the decision they made. And so when they did that, it was me and my younger brothers. My sister was already out of the house. She had joined the Air Force. And so I graduated from Liberty County High School, took a year off, then went to what is now Point University, at the time Atlanta Christian College. Lived in Atlanta. Between going to school and working, I lived in Atlanta for about 10 years. And then I made my way back to Hinesville.
Yeah.
That wasn't my ideal plan, because I had gotten a taste of the city and I enjoyed Atlanta. Once I wasn't afraid of the traffic or like the bigness of it. It just kind of became small to me. It became a home. But a part of my motivation for moving back to Hinesville was after my mom passed away. This was December 2nd, 2007. And, it was just one of those things where it wasn't a part of my plan, but I didn't really have a major plan in Atlanta anymore.
Yeah.
So back to Hinesville. And I thought that when I moved, that my point was going to be I'm going to be here for my dad and support him. And it was my dad and one of my brothers who were living at the house. And, it ended up being that he was more of a support for me that I didn't know I needed.
Yeah.
And so I was there in Hinesville for 3 years. Then I got involved with, at the time named Savannah Christian Church, but Compassion. And I was also working in Savannah. And that's when I decided to make a move in Savannah, 2012, I think.
Yeah. And so thanks for sharing that beautiful overview. And I do want to zoom into some of it, if that's okay with you. So growing up military, you said that your dad's longest duty station was at Fort Stewart.
Yeah.
How old were you when y'all moved Hinesville, to this area?
I was 10.
Okay. And so what was it like living in Hinesville for you? So you're 10, And so y'all are living on post, or y'all living outside of post?
We are on post.
Okay.
Because he's in the military, like from 10 to 16, he's active duty Army.
Mm-hmm.
So we were on post that entire time.
Okay. So tell me what it was like for you to live on post, and what was school like, and all of the journey that is military living.
Military living is us kids, we just had a common bond.
Mm-hmm.
Our bond was that our parents were in the military. So this meant having friends from everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, I like to think of it as a rainbow tribe, because there were so many different cultures, and we were from so many different places. But what united us was that our parents were in the military.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how my friendships looked. Just this great big mix of kids who had this bond with military. I'm sorry. When we moved from Germany, I think that was the hardest. It was right before we were going to make the move back to the States, because we had to say bye to those friends. Yeah. And as a kid who is a part of that military life, it is hard when you've made these bonds. 3 years is a good amount of time to make a bond with someone and with friends, and then having to say goodbye. Thankfully, we didn't have to experience that as much because of being at Fort Stewart for such a long time.
Yeah.
And then my dad retiring in the same area. I was able to keep a lot of those relationships, but those are some of the things that were realities for kids in the military. Is I'm going to say bye to you, and as a child, I don't know if I'm going to see you again.
Yeah.
Because it's not up to me, and we didn't have all of the technology that's going, that we have today. So it was like, you're my best friend, and I might not see you again. But what I loved about it is memories of places that I may not have been able to experience if it weren't for the military. So I'm really thankful for those opportunities to go take field trips to castles when we were in Germany, and living so close to France. And I mean, there were a lot of different opportunities that we had because of that.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting, and I'm glad that you shared that aspect of being a child with parents in the military, or with a parent in the military. Being in a military town, so Savannah, we're surrounded.
Yeah, yeah.
So we have Hunter, and then we have Fort Stewart, but then I think, isn't there a post or something there's something in Florida and in South Carolina, I believe. Anyway, it's kind of here, like you kind of have that recognition. And my dad was military as well, but by the time he retired, I was a little kid. So we moved to Germany. My sister was born in Germany, and then we came back here. And that was also his journey, is that he landed at Fort Stewart, stayed there, retired.
Everybody stays at Fort Stewart.
Fort Stewart, yeah. Fort Stewart is, most people's story is like, this is my longest duty station right here. But we didn't grow up with that experience of having to say goodbye, of not having a home base, because by the time my dad retired, like, we ended up being here. And so I'm from Savannah. That's where I'm from, because this is where all my memories are. Probably like 5 or 6.
Yeah.
So my dad graduated. He retired. He graduated from the Army. He retired, and I was young. And so what you just highlighted, though, is that of having those friends that are different from different areas. And you explained it as like a rainbow tribe. But then on top of that, there is that bittersweet of being young and already having to experience that you're my best friend, and I have to say goodbye to you, and I don't have Facebook. So my mom can't friend your mom to make sure that we stay in touch.
That's true.
Yeah. And so you went to school on post as well.
Yes.
Because they have schools there. Mm-hmm. And so how long did you go to school on post/base?
All of elementary, all of it, including 6th grade, which I know the breakdown now is 6th graders or middle schoolers, but basically, K through 6. Mm-hmm. And so the transition from going to school on post and then merging myself with the on post and civilian off post kids was a little bit different because that was going into middle school. And some people may not know the history of Liberty County High School, but it started off as Liberty County Middle High School, 6th through 9th grade. And each year they would take off a grade and add a grade. So remove 6, add 10th, and so on and so forth until they were able to just call it Liberty County High School. So for me, my experience was Liberty County Middle High School and Liberty County High School, 7th through 12th grade.
Yeah.
And so my background was having all of these military kids and these different experiences to it was culture shock because there were kids who were born and raised in Hinesville, Midway, Riceboro, and some of those other surrounding areas in Liberty County. And we were all merged together in that middle high school situation. And so it was different for me because I think that's where I started to see some of how the students were separated.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like everybody was mad at each other and there wasn't animosity, but there was separation. And it was kind of like clearly defined. You had your black cheerleaders and your white cheerleaders and your white football players and your black. So it was all just kind of separate, but there wasn't trouble in the water. It was just an understanding.
Yeah.
And so I kind of found my people to hang out with. But it was a little bit different. I had to get used to that because it wasn't just, we're all like melted together. It was like, no, we're separated and it's just an understanding. It was really different.
Yeah, no, and that makes sense too, because like in the military, especially living on posts, your neighbor is your neighbor is your neighbor. That's who you live next to. These are the kids I play with. And you also have that common bond of the same experience. Like we're all experiencing dad or mom and dad deploying.
Yeah.
We're all experiencing, we all have this understanding of what it feels like to just have to move. And so there is a common thread that as a kid, you're probably not even aware that that common thread is there. But then to go into a sphere where it's like, oh, like, you all like the same thing, therefore you hang out together. Okay.
Yeah.
You all see the world the same, therefore that is how things are separated. Because it doesn't sound like there was like any kind of like
no tension,
but it was just very much like I'm hanging out with people who have the same interests as me. So for you, it's like
where do I fit? And so it was just an interesting time because then there's the whole being bullied. And so that was its own grouping, like I was a kid who was bullied, who then turned into that bully. I mean, not really. I would like to think of it more as I'm just defending myself. I don't know what I'm going to face today. So I'm going to put on my mad face.
Yeah.
Don't bother me. I mean, even though I had a really gentle heart, it was that, I'm going to put the shield on so that you don't bother me. Because if I can look angry and kind of mad and scary, then you're not going to bother me. Yeah. So yeah, for me, middle school, it was a weird thing to navigate because I was bullied. And so I don't really feel like I had a place because I just wanted to escape it. Yeah. But there were a few people that I call friends, and even to this day, they're my friends. And I found my little bitty tribe. Yeah. But it still was a challenge. Middle school was a rough spot.
Yeah. And were you did you have the language at that age to express to your family or to even to your siblings that like, this something is happening over there and I don't know where I fit and people are being mean to me? So like with your bullying, was it verbal or physical or both?
Well, it never got to the point where it was physical. I mean, in elementary, sure, a boy wiped his marker on my pants and, maybe pulled my sweater or something. But middle school, it was just that humiliation.
Yeah.
And I'll just give you an example so that you can have something to work with. I remember being on the bus, and all it takes is like that one or two kind of popular people to start the picking.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd gotten on the bus, and it was not a popular thing to be a kid with a weight issue. Mm-hmm. So that this one picker, he started, and then he got all of the other kids on the bus laughing. And so for that entire ride, I am being ridiculed, laughed at. It was horrible. Now, when this happened, my sister, who's older than me, she was meeting me at the bus stop. She had a drink of Kool-Aid for me. She had a cup of Kool-Aid for me and one for her. And we were going to walk home together. And when I got off that bus and she saw that I was not well, she went into that sister mode, because that's how she is as the oldest. Mm-hmm. She was, and still is to this day, a defender of her siblings and of her family. And so that moment is an example of things that happen to me quite frequently. So I kind of learned how to zone out. If I could just walk through the hallway without hearing anybody say anything about me, then I'll be okay. Yeah. And, as a result of all of that was going on, my grades were impacted because it's hard to concentrate when you don't know if you're going to get picked on when you go to the next class. And I spent time in, they call it, I don't know if ISS, in-school suspension. Mm-hmm. Do they still call it that? I don't know what they call it now.
I don't know.
But maybe. I went there only because I would skip classes. I would skip PE because who wants to live through that tragedy? But I wasn't in ISS because of behavior. It was because of trying to avoid another situation where I knew I was going to get bullied.
Yeah. And so did you have the language to, so your sister knew because she picked you up, and so she's ready to have this sisterly bond over Kool-Aid, and then she sees that you're upset. So she's aware of it.
Totally defends me. Yeah. So when it happened in elementary school, I did talk to my parents. And this is when we moved from Germany. It was our first time kind of settling in the States. We moved temporarily to North Carolina while my dad was getting things ready for his station at Fort Stewart. So that meant for a few months we were going to be in North Carolina. And so this is the instance where I got my family involved, because I overheard 8 students they were planning to jump me. And they didn't like me because I was from Germany and, maybe thought I was better. Mm-hmm. But I overheard them, and I went to the principal. And I went to my family, and my dad came to the principal's office. The principal called in all of those students, maybe 3 boys, and the rest were girls. And he warned them not to mess with me. And then later on that day, over the intercom, he didn't say my name, but he said, "There's a girl at this school who has been bothered, is being bothered. If you dare mess with her, you'll have to answer to me." And I knew it was me, and the kids started to look at me and their heads started to fall sheepishly. It's like some movie scene where they're like, "Is she talking about her?"
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's when I got family involved. When it happened in middle school, it was just because I had a good home situation. School was school and home was home. Mm-hmm. So I didn't really talk about it. Yeah. Unless it was my sister saw it, she saw the aftermath of it. So otherwise, if she hadn't seen it, it wouldn't have been a conversation, because it's just something I didn't want to talk about.
Yeah. And at that point, it seems like you're compartmentalizing almost. So then when you go home, that's your safe base. So you feel safe there. You're able to be yourself there. There's no one making fun of you or picking on you. So I can see how in that brain it is why would I disrupt this by bringing that junk here.
You be mean to your little brothers. That's what you do, right?
Oh, no.
You turn into
to the thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, because we don't have at that age, we don't have the filter to understand that is probably why we're being mean to them. We just think they're just annoying. I had to hit him. You don't understand. Like, he's just annoying. But it makes sense to me that in that frame of mind, you just either wouldn't think to bring it up, or it just doesn't feel like it's something you would bring up.
Yeah.
And so how is it then did the bullying stop in middle school, or did it continue on into high school? Or your school at this point is shaving off grades. So I don't know how it works. So
yes, the grade shave. So I changed. Not a lot about my situation changed, but I did. My early high school years, I would say around 14, was pivotal for me because I made a decision to follow Christ. And when I gave my life to him, I really meant it, you know? Mm-hmm. And so it changed the way I saw people. It changed in some ways the way I saw myself, you know, like it changed a lot. And because of that change, it did impact my environment. Yeah. My senior year, the newspaper, I don't know how this happened. I don't know if I was recommended, but the newspaper came to our school and they were looking for a story, you know, like from one of the students. And someone referred me because I had changed a lot, you know, in that middle to high school time frame. And they wanted to do an article on me becoming a Christian. I'm like, okay, Liberty County newspaper, yeah. I'll take it. And I was also doing media production at the same time. So they got a picture of me on the camera. And then the article title was Youth's Life Changes. She Accepts the Lord in this public newspaper. And so they even interviewed a girl who knew me in middle school. And she said, you know, I was scared of Melissa. But now her life has changed so much. And like my people who saw that transition would come up to me. So even though what people may have been saying about me, maybe that didn't change a lot, but I had changed so much that my outlook and my view of them and the world, it changed a lot. That was a really pivotal point for me.
Yeah, no, I love what you just shared there. Like, I think that is so much of what faith is kind of built on, is that your out, like how you feel and treat other people would change. And so I love the quote and tagline that you have there of like, even if the circumstances didn't change, there was a change in you. And so from there, from high school, you then go to Atlanta. And how has that changed? So you go from being military, moving around, we're all connected here, rainbow family, to I'm in this school, kind of a culture shock. And Hinesville has a Panera now, though. Like, and
it has grown.
They're popping.
There's a Chick-fil-A, too.
No, I remember when that Chick-fil-A came, and I was like, I see you. You got an Ulta. I see you, Hinesville. Like, I see you coming on up.
Even wait.
But, I mean, Hinesville only had Fort Stewart for a little bit there, and then some other things. But I digress. So you're kind of in this it's like a small town. Yeah. And then you go to Atlanta.
To the city.
To the big city. So what was that transition like to Atlanta?
Well, so when I was on campus, I didn't have a car. So I relied on I had native friends who lived in the city and we would drive around and go places. It was so eye-opening. Like, I needed that. I needed to see the world differently. I needed to be around people who we had this common bond, which was our faith, but still we were all very different. And at this point, we're not just going to school together like in high school where you leave and you come back. We're doing life together because we're living on campus. Yeah. And so that experience it was life-changing because I made bonds that I still have to this day. And it was really cool to not be, I don't know, in high school, at least from what I could see, there were not a lot of Christians. And if they were, maybe they weren't as vocal as I was. I'm not sure. But to be at this college where there are people who are as passionate, if not more, it was just like, wow. And then to be able to learn in this environment and grow, and then to live in Atlanta, in this city, it was important because that experience helped to form a lot of the way that I think. And I needed that. I needed to be off into a city and experience that.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And so you live in Atlanta for a while, you graduate, and then you end up getting a job there.
Yeah.
And then you also highlighted that what brought you back from Atlanta to Hinesville again was the passing of your mom. Mm-hmm. And so what was that like for you to lose a parent, or to lose your mother?
It was just hard. Because I had this plan prior to the move. I had been working at my church, and right when I was hired, I said, I'll do this for a year, but then I want to get another job so I can make more money so I can come home more frequently to check on my mom. Mm-hmm. Well, that didn't happen. I did work for a year and did some gigs and stuff, but then my mom passed away. And it's not like a feeling that I can really describe. It just felt like I must be dreaming. But then there was this weird relief that she's not sick anymore, because when you have a parent who's ill, you don't know when. And when there are scares, and she had some scares, it rocks your world because you don't know if this is going to be the moment. I'm sorry.
No, take your time.
So it was a weird time because I could feel this, I could feel a wall caving, just rising up on my heart, like it was just hard to see. It was hard to see when there would be daylight. Like I like to write, and I do a lot of writing. And so I wrote about my experiences when they were happening. And I remember writing about, when will I see the sun again? When will it be spring? Because it just felt like every day was this gray following me. And it was a couple of things. It was, one, I'm moving back to this city that I didn't really want to move to, because I liked Atlanta, but that wasn't working out for me anymore. Two, I'm moving to the city and she's not even here. Yeah. So it sucked. Like double sucked. Mm-hmm. And for a very long time it did. But I mentioned earlier about the support that my dad was. Yeah. Like he was my rock. He would pray for me in the morning. Like when I finally got a job, settled in Hinesville, in the morning before he would go to work, him, the one who had been married to my mother for 32 years, he would pray with me. And I drew strength from him, even though he was probably very weak and didn't feel like he had a lot to offer. So, just between my dad and my brother was living at the house too, and like some of our other family friends, being able, and my friends that relationships that I had developed over the years, those people, they walked with me through that darkness. And I know I couldn't have done it alone. And I will always miss my mom, but the pain is a little bit different, so the tears now are more of, I've got these life changes happening and I would love to tell you, or look what's happening in the world. She would have so much to say about all of it. Yeah. And I want to know what she's thinking. And so those are the kinds of moments where I'm like, gosh, it hurts in a different way. Like it hurts in a way that I can live and I can survive. I just really miss her voice.
Yeah. No, the way you described it, when you said it's hard to explain. My dad passed 9 years ago, and it's really hard to explain. Especially for me, my dad was not the one that was ever sick. So when he got sick, that was weird to begin with. But then I feel like a piece of me is not here, but it's so strange because it's not like, I mean, he's not my child. He is my father. But it does feel like there is like a piece missing.
Yeah.
But I felt the same way. My dad loved movies, and my dad used to love to like have these weird, like his favorite movie marathons. They're not weird, they were him, but so we would watch Batman and all the Indiana Joneses, but we would have to watch The Dark Knight. And he loved action movies. So like every Marvel movie I went to over the last couple of years, I'm like, I would just love to like, we would have the longest, yes, and he used to watch Iron Man too. Like, this would be the longest marathon. Like, this would be so fun. Like, what would he think about this? Or would he be over it by now? Or even just like in this world context, like, because my dad was introverted, I am extroverted. So I used to like trap him. Because that's how it's extroverts do. But I would call him on my way home from work and like talk to him about how my day went. And it's like, you're either going to hang up on me or you're going to listen to me. And hanging up on me would be rude. So I've trapped you. And so it's still that. It's like exactly what you described. I don't know if you've seen this video. And it's like a video plus an image that talks about grief. And it's like a ball in a box. And so when you first experience grief, it's like the ball is really big. And so in the picture, there's buttons in the box. And then the ball is huge in the beginning of grief. And so any kind of shaking, so like any little thing hurts when you first lose someone or you're grieving. But then as time goes on, your box gets, like the ball gets smaller. And so every now and again, it gets shaken, like birthday, holiday. Although like being almost 10 years, it is strange because it does like, it'll be his birthday, like, or it'll be a birthday or a celebration or something, and it doesn't hurt as much as it did last year. Yeah. So this year it doesn't hurt. Last year did, but then the thing that has me crying is like coming across a note. Whereas a couple of years ago, that was something that was heartwarming. It's really strange, like what shakes the box, but either way, the ball is smaller. So it's like you said, of as you go through the grieving cycle, it never really stops. But it is hard to explain losing a parent because it is a different kind of feeling. But what I love that you described, which is different from my journey, is that I ran away from my grief for 6 months. It sounds like for you pressed into it, and that's because eventually you have to go there. Running away from grief is not advised because it will find you. It found me 6 months later. But it's that my journey is very similar, as that support. And I think it's really beautiful what you highlighted about your dad praying for you and having those friends and having family member, and y'all are supporting each other in your grief, because that is so important. Of not walking, because you can't walk that alone. Like I had a friend once, and it sounds ominous because it's like, are you threatening me? But she told me, she's like, that big cry is going to come for you because I see you running from that grief. And it did. And it got me. But I couldn't have done that without walking, like having people walk alongside me. So thank you for sharing that, because I think for people who are, maybe they're in the midst of grief, just know that it is a part of the process, and it's not fun. It's not fun. And I love your imagery of it feeling like it's gray, and is spring going to come? And is it going to feel right to laugh and smile again? Or because then there are those moments where you laugh or you smile, like, is that wrong? I know that I had that feeling of like, this feels wrong, especially in the first 2 years, but it is a part of the process, and it is a long process, and
it's okay that it takes that time. And I don't want to paint a picture of it, even though I had those people, I had began to just have avoidant behavior in terms of my health. And some people where I would just, not return phone calls and not like get into these spirals of isolation. And in my mind, I was justified. So if I want to be avoidant, I can, because I'm grieving. So yes, I was hanging out with that grief, but it also became this friend. that gave me reason to have excuses for not connecting or for avoiding things that I knew I needed to take care of.
Yeah. No, it's really hard because there's a balance in all things. Because I think that as you do have to walk with pain, but we can't hold on to it. We can't give it a hug. We can't build it a house. We have to kind of treat it like a temporary thing. But we can't run away from it either because it's coming.
Oh, it will come.
It's here.
Like it happened with you.
Yeah. No, I ran hard. And I've shared this with some people, but like I did the avoidant thing too. But like in the I just stopped paying bills for no reason other than I guess I didn't have the energy, and it's just like I then felt justified. But then when they finally caught up to me, I'm like, I don't know why I did that. Like I have no idea why self-destructive. I don't know why that happened. But again, there is that balance of I do think it is important to like, I'm just sad today and I'm just going to sit in this versus, as you're putting it, befriending it, allowing it to be a shield that prevents you from doing the things that they're probably going to be really beneficial to you. Maybe in that moment, it's going to be beneficial to pick up that phone and have that cry with a friend or talk about something else to get your mind off of it.
Or deal with whatever you're avoiding because I avoided health things and symptoms that I was experiencing. I was in the hospital, emergency, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
There were symptoms that I saw of sickness long before it came to a point where I didn't have a choice but to have the ambulance come and take me off. And it's not like I didn't have everything I needed to see that you probably need to go get that checked out. It was just, I was kind of checked out.
Yeah. No, and that's what it can look like too. It comes in so many different shapes and sizes, but I appreciate you sharing that other aspect of it of it can look like just, I know I need to do this thing, but like I'm in self-destruct mode. I just am.
Yeah.
And that's also normal too. Like it's not advised, but it is normal. So please don't hear me say do that. I'm just saying that it is. Because I think in our culture, too, we don't know how to grieve. I think, especially now, like coming out of counseling and then even the books I've read that talk about, like, I can't imagine being a part of a culture. And like, even when we read in the Bible of like, they're just, everybody is sad. They are feeling their feelings. They are just going for it.
Yes.
Because it felt weird. Because it's like, for me at the time, I'm working a job, so I guess I go back to work now.
Right.
Nobody else's world has stopped, just mine. I mean, there's probably other people's worlds who have stopped too, because other people have things happening, but my world has stopped moving. But you're still working, you're still in that dating relationship, you're still frustrated about something that happened 2 weeks ago, but my world has literally ceased in motion. And so I know that for me, the biggest thing was trying to figure out, like, how do I, with a world that ceased moving, navigate being in worlds with people whose worlds have not ceased?
Yes, that's a good point.
Right. Like, how do I go back to work after this, I guess, week off to just, I've only had time to prep things. And I know the job I had at the time, I could have asked for more time off. I just didn't know what to do. I only got a week off.
Right.
And so there is almost like this, especially in Western culture, feeling like we have to speed past the pain.
Keep going. Keep working. Keep doing.
Yeah. No, so I appreciate you sharing that, because that is a huge part of it, of like being mindful of if you are in grief right now. And grief isn't only just connected to death of a loved one. It can also be death of a dream.
Yeah.
It can be death of something that you were hoping for, death of a friendship. And I know that a lot of those are probably happening with this current social climate. And so, yes, those grief cycles are going to look different, but just be mindful of, are you shutting down? Are you, as you put it, like avoiding those big things like health, or in my case, like finances? Are you avoiding those things and then befriending grief?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes. No,
we don't want to do that.
No. Don't make it a house there. That's not appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
And so as you've healed through that, you said that's been 4 years.
No, 2007. So what's the math on that?
Ooh, 13. So 13
on
years.
December 2nd, it'll be 13 years.
13 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so for you, it's been 13 years. And so you've moved back here. You've gone through your grief cycle. And as you've put it, and like with the analogy that we've talked about, the button's gotten smaller. Or not the buttons, the ball's gotten smaller. And I do want to highlight, just based off of all aspects of you and your perspective and your worldview, and just seeing what you've walked through quite a bit, especially like being a military kid and these moves and these jumping from different culture shocks and this family event. How have you been in this current climate with COVID and racial unrest, and we are in a voting season?
It's a lot.
It's a lot. So how have you been dealing with that?
Yeah. You mentioned a couple of Facebook videos that I did.
Yes, yes. And that's really when I watched the first one. And I watched a little bit of the second one. And I love watching other people explain where they're at and how they're feeling, because it helps me give language to something that I might not be able to nail down, like that. What you just said, that describes it. Yeah. And so I thought that you did such a great job of like inviting people into your perspective. It didn't feel like Melissa's saying this is how everybody should be feeling, but like, let me invite you into what I'm thinking and feeling during this time. So as a Black woman who has the world experiences that you have, can you share with us a little bit of your perspective?
It's been a strange time, and I've been doing a lot of processing. You know, when a part of being able to process is to communicate. I'm a communicator, and I like to speak, and I like to write. And so when I did those videos, that was back in May, it was good. It was important for me to be able to communicate. But then things just, and you know this, riots began to happening and protesting, and it just, everything started to get bigger, and I felt like I was getting smaller. And where it may have been a nice time to, well, now you need to say something, you need to post something else because people are listening and people are waiting and they want to know what you have to say.
Yeah.
But for me, it was like, wait, I've got to now process, because I started to think, you know, maybe as Black people, there is this, I think of recovery a lot. So let me just start it off with that. You think of someone who's had childhood trauma, and if undealt with as adults, that those experiences form a person's relationships, their interaction with the world, the kind of job they may choose or career or who they work for, all of these different things. And so I began to get really deep in my thoughts about there was some trauma that happened to a whole people group. And my life is rooted in those people who were impacted by that trauma. And so I just felt like I have to process this. Like I'm not in a place where I can be the person who's asked all the questions of, well, what do we do now, Melissa? You know, of my white friends who are just really wanting to be involved and be very helpful. I felt like I have to process what I'm feeling, because here's what I don't want to happen. I don't want bitterness to take root. And because what I do know is that it's a lie to say that, well, now this means that all white people are bad and all police are bad and this is the world. If I say those kinds of things, then I'm excluding people who I know would lay down their lives for me, you know, like white people who are my family. And so that didn't work. But still, there's this piece of injustice that is happening, and I can't close my eyes to that. You know, I can't close my eyes to what's going on. And another piece of that for me was looking at the church, because the church, big church, has a desire to be world changers. You know, we want people to come to know Christ and all of the truth. The unfortunate part is that a lot of race things and experiences, and even my own experiences, have happened in the church. So it's like, wait a minute, this is the message of Christ, but all of a sudden it just, can I be Black and a Christian? And why is it that my Blackness is associated with movement and badness and politics versus it being who I am? Yeah. As a Christian, I can embrace being both Black and being a Christian. But a lot of times what happens, and it's not intentional, I want to stress that. But what happens in churches is, well, we don't really need to talk about that because this is unity. And, you know, we're all on the same page. But if you can't see my pain, then we're not really unified, because it's kind of a deflection. Let's not look at the issues we have here. Let's just pray them away. And if I equate that to like a trauma situation, I wouldn't dare tell a survivor of a trauma to just pray away the abuse that you experienced as a child. Just pray it away. It'll all be fine. That I would say to that person, it would help to talk to someone to get some support. Maybe there are people who've had the same experience as you. I wouldn't blow off their experience. And unfortunately, what I've seen, even now with what's going on, is a blow off of the experience, a blow off of the hurt and the pain. And that it's put me in a place of saying, God, just keep my heart, you know, because I don't want to be bitter, but I certainly don't want to walk away from injustice, you know, because it's got this beautiful balance that I believe that it can happen, but I will not. And I had an experience where more than once someone may try to sway me to just kind of change what you're thinking. And, you know, because we're Christians and let's just get back on that Jesus path and we don't need to talk about the color stuff. And I'm not going to do that, because I believe that's when we're really far from Christ, when we don't want to see that, yes, there are issues, and yes, there are things that we can do to address them in a way that is good and kind and loving and uncomfortable and, a little broken.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I appreciate what you said about unity, of it being false unity, because that's something I've been playing with, is that unity at its core is beautiful, but getting there is messy. Yeah. And like a lot of, as we talked about, like who you are and what shaped you, this is what I'm convinced about with myself. And I'm going to talk about what I see in you, is that I see how the messy of my upbringing and the pain that I've experienced in my family, losing a parent and then a parent having a stroke and then having a lot of family things, that messy, yes, I ran from it, but I've also become really comfortable in chaos. I thrive there to the point where it was hard to exit chaos mode. But like, I'm okay in chaos. I'm okay with messy. And that veneer of like Christendom, of like, you have to have it together. Like a lot of the people I met that I'm the closest to, is I was at that breaking point where I'm like, my life's a wreck and I'm a mess. And they were like, ooh, you're coming in hot. And so I'm okay with messy. And so I think I try to be careful not to push people to become more comfortable when they are, but I do have this recognition of like, when I see unity, I'm okay with the messiness that it's going to take to get there. Yeah. Like, okay for the fact of like, I know it's going to be messy, and I know on the other side of it, there's going to be something beautiful. But like getting dirty is going to happen. People's feel like my feelings might get hurt. I might say something wrong. Humbleness would be required, but that's going to be okay if we can get to that thing. And I think that a lot of that has come from that worldview of, and even having taught to me perseverance and like giving up not being an option. And so that's always kind of been with me. Yeah. And the same as we talked about with your story of like, yes, you dealt with bullying and you've dealt with a lot of things, but there was a transformation for you. But that doesn't negate that bad things happen. Right. But what mattered was how you see people. And then even walking through your grief of having that recognition of like, man, unless you dropped the ball, like you could have taken care of your health stuff, like you ran away or you avoided. Yeah. And so to me, that pain and the things that we experience kind of like refine us to the messiness that it takes to handle injustice or to even be in spaces that are uncomfortable. So even if it is just work and it's uncomfortable, I'm like, I am not going to die if I'm uncomfortable. You know what I mean? Like it's not going to end me. It's not going to be the worst thing ever. I don't like it. So I'm not saying, yes, I love chaos and pain. I don't like it, but I know that I'm going to be okay on the other side. Right. And so I explained that to say, the reason I asked, we started there, and then I asked you about your perspective, is I think that stuff, not necessarily, I'm not want to say it gives us an edge, but I do think that we have brothers and sisters in Christ, or even brothers and sisters in this world who either aren't aware of how to sit in that discomfort and all they know is to run away, or they don't fully, like they haven't fully thought about like what unity looks like. Because even these words of, let's love each other. Love isn't easy either. None of these things are easy. And I think that it is easy to look at people who are doing the work to say, well, they're doing it so easily, so I can't do it. It's not easy for them either. I know that it's not easy for me. Choosing unity sometimes means snoozing, defriending. Yes, it does. On Facebook. Sometimes unity means that I have to remind myself that you are a full human being that I know and love and I used to give hugs to and that I have broken bread with. And even though you're saying something that's hurtful to me about this current climate, that doesn't negate, I don't get to just take that information and hold on to it and say, now you're the worst person ever. I have to have it in context of the fact that I had a relationship with you. Yeah. And so I think that in what I would love to see for the church, Big C, is if we're going to fully step into this, almost like let's drop the Jesus Band-Aid. And he is the healer, and it's not going to be done without him, but we have to drop that for the sake of unity. We have to be willing to kind of roll up our sleeves and look at our neighbor and say, I might not agree with you, or maybe I don't see the world the way you do, but how do we sit in this messy together and be humble enough that if we hurt each other, it's going to be okay.
Yeah. And we can do that, but it does mean that it won't be all nice and fuzzy and it won't feel good and it'll be uncomfortable. But, you know, there's so much healing that comes from discomfort. Yeah. And it's not just this, oh, let's make this awkward and uncomfortable just because. There's intention behind that. There's purpose behind it because we want to grow and we want to love. I do believe that there's a deep desire for that. I do want to love you, even though I cannot agree with what you're saying. I don't, but my desire is to love you. And even though we don't see the world the same way, I think if we realize the intention of the discomfort and then we're willing to go there, because I think it's easy to put the blinders on. I mean, there's a lot that we just put the blinders on in life and we just keep going. Yeah. But when we take them off and we see that, oh, this is really messy. This is bad, you know, but it doesn't mean that it's impossible, you know, and messy doesn't always mean bad. It doesn't have to mean bad always, because on the other side of that, there's some goodness. But getting through that mess and the discomfort is what is most challenging, I think.
Yeah. Well, I love that you brought up earlier is that you took time to process before. So you posted these 2 videos back in May, and then things just kind of had an uptick.
Mm-hmm.
And so for you, that was a moment to pull back, process, deal with what you were feeling, and not risk potentially posting a video or saying something out of pain. And I think that's very wise.
Yeah.
Could you share about that, what your process was, and then just the reason, like, because I get your reason why, but like, what would you say to somebody that probably does need to pull back and process their own feelings? What would your encouragement be to them to, like, hey, you don't have to speak right now. You can sit back.
I'm glad that you asked that question, because there were moments where I felt like I can take to social media. I have got to say something, but I know myself well enough to know that I would soon regret those words. And, words are these things that we can't just take back, So for me, it was this behind the scenes processing. It was talking with my friends who were white, not big groups, but like 2 close friends, and allowing them to ask these tough questions, and us having these conversations that were uncomfortable, but important. And like I had done a lot of behind the scenes work, conversations with my friends who are the same color, checking in on them. We're trying to process with each other. I was a guest at one of my friends who's an instructor for her class, like at a Zoom classroom situation, and then I had an opportunity to be a part of another gathering as a panelist. So for me, that action was, I'm still very much involved in this. Just because you don't see me taking to the pages and the post, it doesn't mean that my actions or intentions have changed. So a lot of it is that behind the scenes work, where still having conversations, still being involved in things, like this podcast is an example of that, where my voice is still out there. And then when I think that I'm in a place where I want to share again in that way, then I'll do it. But it was like more of I need to process behind the scenes, because I can't just take back something and post out of emotion. I'm a processor anyway, so I don't like to do a lot of things when I'm in an high emotional state. Yeah. I like to be level and then do it.
No, I think there's a lot of wisdom there, and I think that's great that is like your natural disposition. But I didn't think there's tons of wisdom behind, like, guys, like, let's like do some like self checks. Where am I at right now? Am I in a place where I should be sharing right now? Am I in a place where I should be saying anything right now? Because do you think, especially like with the racial unrest being primarily on like with Black Americans, it can feel like, especially if you have a voice or if you have any kind of like people around you, it can feel like, I have to talk. Yeah. I have to be the one to answer the questions. I have to be available. And that's not true. And I think that's for everybody, is if there's something happening and you feel that pressure, but you're also not in that space to do it, you don't have to. And it might feel like that's wrong. But like what you were pointing out is that doesn't mean you're still not doing something. And so does that mean that you need to be taking care of yourself? Does that mean that you need to be processing with friends that get it, that understand where you're at? Or does that mean that you need to be doing things that aren't social media related, but that are actual in-person work? Or do you need to be reading a book? Like, all those things are important, but let's not feel like we have got to be posting lives or be posting long posts, or getting in Facebook fights or any of that. Like, that's not really, if you're not in that place, then that's okay. Make sure that you're doing what works, like through self-reflection.
Especially when there's so much to process. Like I feel like I'm still in that place, and it would be premature to say something because of the place that I'm in, like it would be premature to say something in front of a large audience, and a large audience is social media. And so having the moments to do this background processing, through prayer and through conversations and writing, it's been really good for me.
Yeah.
It helped a lot.
No, thank you for sharing like what your processing looks like. And I think that even the advice and like what you're sharing about yourself is great input for, especially because I don't see this season slowing down anytime soon.
Yeah.
With things still happening, and then we're about to go into a voting season, so that just kind of adds to emotional pressure, like emotions and where everybody's at, that adds to it. So if you need to pull away, I love what you're saying here about take that time to process, figure out how you process if you don't know.
Yeah.
But like be doing some self check-ins with yourself.
Yeah.
Because I mean, this is not a sprint. This is going to be a long haul. This is going to be a long road, I think, in terms of if you are interested in justice work, or if you are interested in doing anything related to justice, and even if it isn't racial justice, if it's justice of any kind, you're not in it just for right now. Like it is a journey anytime. Like I look at, because I am that kind of person that's kind of sensitive to all of it, but if you're looking at like education reform or anything with children or foster care, like all of that, if you are interested in all of that, if this is over COVID, you have gotten that I want justice, it's not going to be a sprint in any regard. It's going to be a long race. I'm so glad you said
that. Yeah. One of the things I didn't mention, last year, I was sworn in to be a CASA, which is a court-appointed special advocate for abused and neglected children, right? So all about this justice thing. And everything you're saying is exactly that. This is a long haul. It's not like, oh, this is all right. Well, I'll do this for a couple of weeks and then on to the next. It's like, for example, in taking on a case, a case could go for a while, a child's case. And so, and it's messy. And it is uncomfortable. It's all of these things, but it's this work. Yeah. And there's this beauty on the other side, but we're not going to get there overnight, and being able to be an advocate for children and experiencing these very uncomfortable situations. I also know that, yes, it's going to take time, frustration, work, but there's something so good on the other side of it. And just with what you're saying and that whole justice work, that kind of work, and then the racial injustice, tension, all of it is this, it's this work that we're going to be doing for a while.
Yeah. And so don't burn yourself out, because we need each other. And I love that you brought up that you said it's a CASA. I've not been able to pronounce that correct. Ooh, did I? CASA?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, like even with that, because like in my work with working with children with disabilities, it is easy to just get so bogged down in, yes, we just accomplished this thing, but there's another case. There's another kid, and there's another, and like you have to learn how to celebrate those things along that journey too. But just being in recognition of, if you are engaging in any kind of justice work, there are a whole lot of things involved. And that's something that is my hope to see the church get into, organizations get into, but even like just us in our spheres of being activated for justice for our neighbor and justice for the person next to us. But if you are going to do this journey, it's a long haul. And there's a lot of moving pieces, and it's going to be messy, but it's okay. Because, and you're not messing up because it's messy.
No, it's okay. And I know we like things to be nicely packaged, but that's not our reality.
No. I'm sorry if that's the first time you're hearing it. I'm sorry that you had to find out that way. It's just not, and it's not linear either.
No.
Yes. But thank you so much for sharing. I treasure anytime someone comes and shares their story and shares their worldview and how they're feeling about anything. And specifically for you, I want to thank you for sharing your worldview and sharing like how you've processed these events and just what your thoughts are on it. And so I really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
I do want to end this podcast like we always do, with asking you what your challenge would be for the listeners.
Oh, my challenge would be to, as uncomfortable as it may be, to just dig deep. If there are outstanding things in your past that you hadn't dealt with, it's a good idea to go on and deal with them, because those things, they impact the people that we are today. If I were challenging someone with everything that's going on regarding our racial tension, it would be to embrace those uncomfortable conversations and to just keep talking. Silence has been the biggest border for us. So keep talking. And even if you feel like you don't say it right, it's okay. Even if you get shut down by somebody, talk to someone else who's more open to hearing you.
Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
I really love that challenge. And I think that there are many that are going to really benefit from hearing from you. So thank you so much, Melissa.
So glad I could be here.
Yes, and listeners, we will catch you next time. Bye.